My name is Charlotte Bennett, and for 15 years, I believed in gratitude and family above everything else. I trusted them. I gave them my home, my heart, my life. But in return, they gave me betrayal. This isn't just my story of being used and cast aside. It's a story of how I found the strength to rise up, reclaim my dignity, and rewrite my future. If you've ever felt trapped or betrayed by those you love, listen closely, because my journey might just help you rediscover your own voice, your own power, and your path back to freedom. The day I was kicked out of my own house was the first day I truly came home to myself. It had just rained. The scent of damp concrete clung to the air like something unfinished, unresolved. I stood at the edge of the driveway, the house looming in front of me. White shutters, red brick, manicured lawn. To any outsider, it looked like the American dream. But to me, it had become a mausoleum, holding 15 years of silent sacrifice and slow betrayal. In my left hand, I held a thick manila envelope. In my right, keys that no longer fit the locks. I wasn't crying. Not because I wasn't heartbroken, but because heartbreak had passed. What I felt now was colder, heavier, like a stone in the gut. It wasn't just a house. It was my youth, my belief in gratitude, my blind faith in family. Evan had stood in that doorway less than 24 hours ago. His voice calm, rehearsed. "Charlotte, it's best you leave. This house was never really yours." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like cutting me out of my own life was a kind of mercy. Behind him, his mother nodded approvingly, arms folded like she'd waited years for this moment. My father-in-law didn't say a word. He just sipped his tea. 15 years ago, I thought I was entering a family. Turns out, I had been recruited for a transaction. Back then, I was a senior law student, juggling 2 internships and barely sleeping. I still remember the sound of tires screeching when my car spun off the highway during a midnight storm. Evan's parents, Walter and Lorraine, were the ones who pulled me from the wreckage. Their house was the nearest, and they offered me shelter for 3 days while I recovered. Kind, warm, almost too warm. When Evan and I started dating shortly after, it felt like fate. Looking back, it feels more like grooming. We married 6 months later. I was 24. He had just turned 27. He had no job, but he had charm. I had debt, but I also had determination, and a deeply ingrained belief that I owed them something, that my life had been saved for a reason. That reason, apparently, was servitude. They had inherited an old, worn-down house, but were drowning in back taxes and mortgage payments. I volunteered to help. "It's what family does," I said. I negotiated a deal with the bank, consolidated their debt, and refinanced the house under what I thought was a mutual understanding. The title stayed in Lorraine's name, just for now, they said. To keep it in the family. I should have known better. But when you want to belong, you overlook red flags like they're garden roses. Year by year, I paid down every cent. I remodeled the kitchen with my bonus after my first promotion. I renovated the guest room when Evan said he wanted kids, even though we never had any. Every time I walked into court and won a case, I imagined the windows I'd upgrade or the patio I'd finish. I wasn't building a house. I was building a future. Or so I thought. It wasn't until last week when I made the final mortgage payment that everything began to shift. The air in the house turned cold. Conversations grew shorter. Lorraine stopped pretending to like my cooking. Evan started coming home later and later. I blamed stress. I blamed hormones. I blamed everything but what I should have seen. They were getting ready to discard me. And they did. No fight, no yelling, just a casual meeting in the living room. Lorraine sat on the edge of the couch, flipping through her tablet. "You've done a lot for us, Charlotte," she said. Like I was an old employee they were politely retiring. "But this arrangement has run its course." Evan added, "We think it's time you move on." That's when it clicked. Every document I signed had been under the pretense of family. Every payment made, every improvement, every sleepless night working overtime, it all fed into a house that was never, legally, mine. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I walked upstairs, packed a single suitcase, and left. They didn't stop me. Lorraine even smiled as she closed the door behind me. Now, standing here, on the sidewalk in front of that same house, I could still hear her voice in my head. You should be grateful. We gave you a place to belong. Gratitude. That word had chained me for 15 years. I looked down at the manila envelope. Inside were copies of bank transfers, receipts, signed checks all in my name. Facts don't lie, even when people do. And I was done letting emotions overwrite truth. That night, I checked into a small, furnished rental in the city. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat on the floor and let the silence throb around me like a second heartbeat. But somewhere between 3 a.m. and sunrise, a different kind of thought entered my mind. Not revenge, not rage, just clarity. I had been wronged, and I had the tools to make it right. It was the first time in years that I felt like a lawyer again. Not a wife, not a daughter-in-law. A woman who understood contracts, justice, and consequence. And I knew exactly who I needed to call. In the beginning, everything felt simple. Evan was charming, thoughtful, and the way he smiled always convinced me things would somehow turn out fine. Maybe I was too young, too idealistic, or perhaps just desperate for belonging. Either way, when we exchanged vows on a chilly autumn afternoon, the wind blowing gently through oak trees behind Walter and Lorraine's aging house, I genuinely believed I'd found home. It didn't take long, though, before quiet signals began emerging, subtle yet persistent. They weren't dramatic, but gentle nudges, hints of discomfort I chose to overlook. Like the very first Christmas we spent as a family. Lorraine carefully handing out gifts, designer watches for Evan and Walter, a silk scarf for herself, and for me, a kitchen apron with the words, "Perfect wife, perfect life." The laughter afterward was warm, casual, harmless. But the slight sting lingered. Still, I brushed it away. Families teased each other, I reasoned. I should be grateful they considered me family at all. And gratitude that became the invisible chain. As my career as a lawyer took off, my workload intensified, along with my earnings. Every successful case, every client praising my dedication meant more security. Security I willingly poured into the house. Evan had dabbled in different jobs, but nothing ever stuck. He'd joke, "Charlotte's the brains, I'm the charm." And everyone would laugh, including me. But those jokes, over time, turned hollow. One afternoon, exhausted from a long trial, I came home early and overheard Lorraine whispering to Evan in the kitchen. Her voice was low, cautious, but audible. You need to step it up. Make sure she stays motivated, at least until everything's paid off. I paused by the doorway, my pulse quickening. My hand trembled against the wall. Evan's reply was dismissive, casual, reassuring in its familiarity. "Relax, Mom. Charlotte loves this house as much as we do. She'd never walk away." He was right. I wouldn't walk away. My blind devotion saw to that. I stepped into the kitchen, heart pounding. They quickly shifted their conversation to gardening and smiled warmly. Lorraine complimented my new haircut. Evan kissed me softly on the forehead. That moment, I decided I must have misheard, misinterpreted. Maybe I was paranoid from stress, lack of sleep. I chose to believe the comforting lie rather than confront the unsettling truth. The years went on, and those signals became clearer, louder. My paychecks were quietly absorbed into repairs, renovations, and loans taken out just temporarily, always under Lorraine's or Evan's names. Even as a trained lawyer who scrutinized contracts daily, I willingly ignored the vague financial details they brushed aside. They were family. I trusted them implicitly. Then came the parties they threw to celebrate milestones. The house's 10th anniversary since renovation, Walter's retirement, Lorraine's birthday. I was always politely sidelined as the helpful daughter-in-law smiling, serving drinks, never quite the host, never quite a guest. Friends and neighbors lavished praise on Lorraine's taste in decor, Walter's pride in the family home, Evan's dedication to the property. My name was rarely mentioned. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, but each ignored acknowledgement quietly chipped away at my sense of self. I was disappearing in plain sight. One evening, after another exhausting day in court, I found Lorraine in my study, flipping through my files. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled calmly, said she was looking for something trivial, and left without another word. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew better, but again, I stayed silent. Another moment I refused to confront, and then there was Emmett. Emmett was Evan's younger brother, 4 years his junior. From the start, Emmett was the family's black sheep, rebellious, impulsive, labeled a troublemaker. At 17, he ran away from home, returning sporadically, always distant. Yet oddly, Emmett was the only one in the family who consistently treated me with respect. He saw the little things, the apron, the parties, Lorraine's casual intrusions, and gave me sympathetic looks, subtle nods of solidarity. One rainy afternoon, Emmett found me in the garden, silently weeding flower beds, my fingers covered in dirt. "You don't have to do all this," he said gently, his voice heavy with concern. I smiled weakly. "It's what family does." He crouched beside me, his eyes intense, honest. "Family doesn't ask you to sacrifice everything." I hesitated, heart tightening, then shook my head, brushing it off again. "They saved my life once, Emmett. I owe them." "Just make sure you're not paying forever," he whispered before walking away, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, disappearing into the rain. I stared at the damp earth long after he left, the words echoing quietly, painfully in my mind. A warning, honest, raw. And like all the others before, I chose to ignore it. My denial was a fortress I'd built around myself, strong, comfortable, and deeply lonely. By the time Evan finally spoke those words in the living room, telling me calmly, coldly, to leave, I realized my denial had crumbled long ago. I'd been waiting for this moment for years, pretending not to see it coming, hoping somehow loyalty could rewrite reality. Standing alone now, in that tiny rented apartment, the illusion shattered completely. My breathing steadied, clarity returning with sharp precision. I recognized each signal I'd dismissed, each ignored truth, and saw my own complicity clearly for the first time. But the story wasn't finished yet. My mistakes weren't my ending, they were my foundation. And this time, when Emmett's name flashed on my phone's screen, I didn't hesitate. "Charlotte," he said quietly, his voice firm. "It's time to fight back." And this time, at long last, I was ready to listen. It's strange how your world can crumble overnight, yet clarity can come as effortlessly as breathing. After Evan's calm betrayal and Lorraine's cold dismissal, a heaviness lingered, but it was mingled with something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. For once, I knew precisely who I was, what I was worth, and exactly what I needed to do. The morning after I left the house, I woke early, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and settled at the small kitchen table of my modest rental apartment. Rays of sunlight stretched lazily across worn wooden floors, warming my bare feet. I spread files, notebooks, and records across the surface, laying bare the 15-year mosaic of my life. A quiet fury hummed beneath my skin, but I kept it carefully in check, channeling it into meticulous organization. Emmett arrived exactly at 10, knocking softly at my door. I opened it, meeting his serious gaze. In his hands, a stack of neatly arranged folders. "I thought these might help," he murmured, his voice low. "Emails, recordings, financial records. I've collected quietly for a while now. I knew something like this would come, but honestly, I hoped I'd be wrong." I stepped aside to let him in, closing the door softly behind him. "Thank you," I whispered. "You're the only one who's ever truly seen me." He set the papers gently onto the table, his gaze thoughtful. "Family isn't always blood, Charlotte. It took me years to realize that." I stared at the folders, suddenly struck by the enormity of what lay ahead. Every document was a quiet betrayal from Evan and his parents, carefully hidden until now. "Did you ever confront them?" I asked softly, unsure I wanted to hear his answer. He smiled grimly, shaking his head. "I tried once. They told me I was jealous, unstable. After that, I kept quiet. But silence eats away at you." His gaze held mine. "You're stronger than me." His words, quiet and raw, filled me with resolve. I reached for a folder, opening it gently. Each page revealed meticulously documented instances of deception. Private conversations, bank transactions funneled from my salary into Lorraine's account. Hidden contracts with deliberately vague language. Handwritten notes outlining their precise plans. My throat tightened as I turned to Emmett. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He exhaled slowly, regret shadowing his face. "Honestly, I wasn't sure you'd believe me. You trusted them so deeply, I couldn't bear to hurt you if you weren't ready to hear it." I nodded slowly. He wasn't wrong. Until now, I had built my identity on trust, loyalty, and unquestioning gratitude. I'd willingly ignored every red flag, every subtle betrayal. Emmett's caution, his careful waiting, was rooted in genuine kindness. "You did the right thing, Emmett," I said finally. "But now I'm ready." And I was. Something had shifted fundamentally within me. A decisive snap, as sharp and clear as ice breaking beneath pressure. No longer willing to ignore my own instincts, I began strategizing, organizing the papers into neat piles. Finances, evidence of manipulation, direct threats to my rights. Over the next few weeks, Emmett and I meticulously constructed our case. I'd meet with colleagues discreetly, gathering professional opinions, carefully confirming every detail. Emmett recorded detailed timelines, clarifying each transgression, noting dates and times. Late-night coffee became routine, laughter mixing quietly with exhaustion as our friendship deepened. Emmett's calm steadiness balanced my calculated resolve, creating a powerful synergy. Throughout those nights, memories resurfaced. Each one was a lesson, sharpened now by clarity and acceptance rather than bitterness. My fingers traced old bank statements, marking each time I paid for repairs, renovations, and bills. Each dollar felt like another stone in the fortress I unknowingly built against myself. But rather than regret, I found strength. Recognizing betrayal fully allowed me to regain control over my narrative. Finally, the preparations culminated in one decisive move. Together, we visited the county clerk's office, filing formal legal proceedings against Evan and his parents. The clerk took our paperwork with professional detachment, completely unaware of the life-shaking significance she held in her hands. Walking out into bright afternoon sunlight, Emmett paused, turning toward me. "Are you afraid?" I thought for a moment. The question was valid. Confrontation, especially public and legal, would be brutal, messy, exhausting. Yet, searching my heart, I found only quiet peace. "No," I replied simply. "I think I stopped being afraid the moment Evan told me to leave. Fear held me captive for too long. Now it's time for honesty to take over." Emmett smiled gently. nodding with genuine respect. Then you've already won. We parted ways with plans to reconvene tomorrow, and as I watched him drive away, something lifted from my chest. I walked slowly back toward my rented apartment, each step echoing with quiet determination. That night, sitting by the window, moonlight draping across the floor, I wrote 2 lines into my journal. I'm no longer afraid of losing, because in losing everything, I found the truth of who I am. Closing the journal softly, I understood clearly. Tomorrow's court proceedings wouldn't be about revenge or punishment. It would be about reclaiming my dignity, my identity, and my life. And that, more than anything else, felt like true freedom. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, its stark white walls bathed in clinical fluorescent light. A quiet murmur hovered among the small crowd gathered, their voices hushed yet curious. I straightened the dark blue blazer I chose specifically for today, professional, composed, and resolute. Beside me, Emmett sat calmly, a reassuring presence amid the rising storm. Across the aisle, Evan and his parents sat stiffly, their faces masks of forced composure. Lorraine glanced at me briefly, disdain simmering behind her carefully neutral expression. Evan looked away, avoiding my eyes altogether. Walter stared straight ahead, unreadable as always. "All rise," announced the bailiff. The judge entered, a woman with a firm presence, her voice clear as she called the session to order. My lawyer, Thomas Riley, a respected colleague I'd worked alongside for years, rose first, offering a concise, factual summary of our case. Every sentence he spoke resonated clearly. Financial manipulation, fraud, emotional exploitation, all outlined meticulously and supported by documentation. Then Evan's lawyer stood, his voice smooth, persuasive, confident. "Your Honor, this is simply a misunderstanding. Ms. Charlotte Bennett willingly and knowingly contributed financially, motivated purely by gratitude and affection. This claim of manipulation is baseless, driven by personal disappointment rather than legal standing." The implication was subtle, but clear, painting me as emotional, irrational, perhaps even unstable. I'd anticipated this. I'd once underestimated this family's ruthlessness, but never again. Riley turned toward me, nodding gently. "Ms. Bennett, could you please clearly describe the nature of your contributions to the property in question?" I stood slowly, aware of every pair of eyes settling upon me. Calmly, clearly, I began laying out 15 years of my life-precise details of payments, bank transfers, my earnings funneled toward renovations, utilities, insurance. Each point supported by hard evidence. Facts stripped bare of emotion, revealing a truth that spoke louder than sentiment ever could. The judge listened carefully, her gaze unreadable yet thoughtful. Occasionally, she scribbled notes, her pen scratching quietly against paper. After my testimony, Evan's lawyer began cross-examining me, his tone deceptively gentle but precisely cutting. "Ms. Bennett, isn't it true you willingly entered into these arrangements, without coercion?" "I willingly supported the family I believed had accepted me as their own," I replied, calm and unwavering. What I did not willingly accept was deliberate deception about legal ownership and intentional concealment of financial documents. His mouth tightened slightly. "Yet you're a trained attorney. How could you not be aware of these issues sooner?" I paused, a cold silence filling the courtroom. It was the question everyone asked, and the hardest truth I'd had to face myself. I breathed in deeply, carefully composing my response. "Because I trusted them," I said simply, firmly, directly meeting Evan's eyes for the first time. He flinched subtly, discomfort flickering briefly in his expression. "They were my family, or so I thought. Trust can blind even those trained to see clearly." My voice echoed quietly around the courtroom, resonating with a truth deeper than legality, deeper than documents and bank statements. It spoke of betrayal rooted in human vulnerability. The judge's pen had stopped moving. She studied me intently, thoughtfully. Next came Emmett's testimony, quiet and strong. He detailed conversations overheard, presented audio recordings, and validated timelines. His voice never wavered, even when the opposing lawyer attempted to paint him as unreliable due to his past mistakes. "Mr. Emmett Bennett," the lawyer asked pointedly, "you've had a history of difficulties with your family, correct? Could this be merely a personal vendetta?" Emmett leaned forward, voice calm yet firm. "Yes, I've made mistakes, and because of them, I recognize manipulation when I see it. I kept quiet too long because I feared rejection. But silence made me complicit. Today, I choose truth over fear." His words lingered powerfully, sincerity evident. The courtroom remained silent, absorbing his honesty. Over the next hour, evidence piled up steadily, meticulously, irrefutably. Evan's lawyer attempted to refute, deflect, discredit, but each document was ironclad bank statements, checks, transcripts of recorded conversations, handwritten notes of manipulation. Finally, the judge called a recess to deliberate. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers buzzing as spectators processed the revelations. Evan's parents departed quickly, Lorraine's face pale, Walter tense. Evan lingered briefly, his gaze meeting mine across the room. Regret flickered briefly in his eyes, replaced swiftly by a defensive mask as he turned and walked away. I stepped outside, breathing deeply, the air crisp and bracing. Emmett approached quietly, his expression both cautious and hopeful. "You were amazing in there," he said softly. "No matter how this ends, you stood up. You reclaimed your voice." I nodded, the tension slowly easing from my shoulders. "It's strange. No matter the verdict, I already feel free." Emmett smiled gently, understanding filling his eyes. We waited silently, side by side, until a clerk called us back inside. Returning to the courtroom, the silence was thick with anticipation. The judge addressed the room carefully. "After thorough review, the evidence clearly demonstrates intentional manipulation and financial wrongdoing. Therefore, the court rules in favor of Charlotte Bennett. She shall regain ownership of the property in question, and the defendants shall repay $90,000 as compensation for emotional and financial damages." A gasp echoed through the room. Lorraine's, sharp and involuntary. Evan slumped visibly, head in his hands. Walter remained motionless, staring straight ahead. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only quiet relief and profound clarity. My heart beat steadily, calmly, stronger than before. Emmett's hand gently brushed mine in quiet solidarity. As we stepped outside the courtroom, I took a deep, cleansing breath. The past lay behind me, fully seen, fully acknowledged. I turned toward Emmett, warmth filling my chest as I smiled gently. "Now what?" he asked softly, his voice steady. I looked toward the horizon, sunlight warm against my face. "Now?" I said simply. "We rebuild." The courthouse victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a deeper reckoning. Legal victories always come at a cost, one I'd foolishly underestimated. The morning after the ruling, a wave of exhaustion settled over me. Heavy but cleansing. I'd spent the night reviewing documents in my small apartment, sipping lukewarm tea, and glancing occasionally at my phone. Messages flooded in, some supportive, others accusatory. News spread quickly in our small community, and public opinion was sharply divided. To some, I was the hero who stood up against injustice. To others, a vindictive outsider punishing a family that had once saved her. Yet, I felt strangely distant from it all, suspended in quiet introspection. The victory was real, yes, but there was a deeper current within me that demanded attention. Beneath the surface of my newfound freedom flowed an undercurrent of lingering grief, a sadness for what might have been, what should have been. The phone rang sharply, jolting me from thought. The screen flashed Evan's name. My stomach twisted involuntarily. I hesitated, but curiosity won over caution. "Charlotte?" Evan's voice was subdued, different from anything I'd heard in court, stripped of arrogance. "We need to talk. I think we've said enough," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Please," he said quietly, a vulnerability in his tone that felt foreign, unexpected. "Not for them. For me. Just hear me out once." I agreed reluctantly, arranging to meet in a quiet cafe downtown later that afternoon. As I entered, Evan was already waiting, hunched slightly, looking smaller, worn. We sat quietly for a moment, the space between us thick with unsaid words. "You had every right to do what you did." Evan finally broke the silence, voice low, earnest. "We betrayed your trust. My parents, especially my mother, convinced me from the start that using you was justified because we'd saved your life. I wanted to believe them. It made me feel less guilty." I studied him carefully, recognizing the conflicted sincerity in his face. It would have been easier to feel anger, resentment, but all I felt now was a sad clarity. Evan was weak, easily influenced, but not purely malicious. "That doesn't absolve you," I said softly. "No, it doesn't." He looked down at his hands, avoiding my eyes. "I just needed you to understand. I truly am sorry. Not because I lost, but because I lost you." "Evan," I said quietly, carefully choosing my words. "You never truly had me. You had the version of me you created, the grateful Charlotte, the indebted Charlotte. The real me was invisible to you." He exhaled sharply, absorbing the truth I'd finally spoken aloud. "You're right. I never allowed myself to really see you, and I regret that deeply." Paul. Silence settled between us once again, but lighter now. Honest. Finally, Evan stood up slowly. "I hope someday you'll forgive me, even though I don't deserve it." "I forgive you," I replied evenly, surprising myself with how sincerely I meant it. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, or returning." He nodded, accepting this with quiet dignity, and walked away without looking back. Later that evening, Emmett visited. As soon as he entered, he sensed something different. "You spoke with Evan?" he guessed immediately. I nodded, describing our conversation quietly. Emmett listened thoughtfully, his expression unreadable until I finished. "Do you feel better?" he asked gently. "I feel clearer," I said slowly, honestly. Closure, I suppose, but it also made me realize how deep the manipulation went. Evan isn't innocent, but he's not the mastermind either. Emmett exhaled deeply, hesitation evident before he spoke again. "You should know something else." My heart quickened. "What?" He handed me a small, worn notebook. Lorraine's unmistakable handwriting filled its pages. My pulse quickened with dread and curiosity as I flipped carefully through the pages, recognizing dates, amounts, personal notes about my habits, vulnerabilities, strengths, an entire calculated plan of psychological manipulation. The truth hit hard. Lorraine had orchestrated everything from the start, grooming me carefully through subtle emotional manipulation, ensuring my sense of obligation remained unbreakable. Evan was merely her pawn, albeit a willing one. The realization stung bitterly, deeply, painfully personal. "Where did you find this?" I asked quietly. "In the attic. I knew something was hidden, but never imagined this. I debated showing you, but truth is truth. You deserve to know everything." I sat back heavily, feeling overwhelmed yet liberated. It's terrifying, isn't it? How easily trust can blind us completely. Terrifying, Emmett agreed softly. But now that you know the depth, you have power they can't take away. Clarity is your freedom, Charlotte. I nodded slowly, breathing deeply, letting the truth anchor me. That night, alone again, I opened Lorraine's notebook one last time. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt only quiet, certain resolve. Turning to an empty page at the very back, I wrote a single sentence beneath Lorraine's meticulous handwriting. You lost, because my truth was stronger than your lies. Closing the book gently, I placed it on the desk, its presence no longer threatening, but empowering. Tomorrow I would return to court, finalize every detail, and officially sever ties. But tonight was mine, reclaimed fully and irreversibly. In the quiet of my apartment, I stood by the window, gazing at the stars, cold yet comforting, and whispered quietly to myself, no more hidden truths, no more deep waters. From now on, clarity. And as sleep finally claimed me, peace settled gently, deeply, like snowfall in silence. I thought the hardest part was behind me. After Evan's quiet apology and discovering Lorraine's disturbing notebook, a strange calmness had settled within me. But just as I began to believe the storm had passed, reality reminded me that legal battles never end smoothly. It was a bright Tuesday morning when Thomas Riley called me urgently. His tone immediately unsettled me. Charlotte, there's a complication. They've filed new evidence, he said, his voice unusually tense. My heartbeat quickened. What kind of evidence? Bank records, alleging you authorized large withdrawals for personal use. It's convincing, even has your signature. He sighed. Charlotte, they're accusing you of embezzlement. My throat tightened painfully. That's impossible. I believe you, Thomas quickly interrupted. But we need proof. Without clear evidence disproving this, our entire case could unravel. I hung up, feeling dizzy, shock spreading through me like poison. Every document I'd ever signed flooded my memory. Could I have unknowingly signed something? No. I was meticulous, even in blind trust. Someone had expertly forged my signature, someone who knew my writing well enough to deceive even professionals. I called Emmett immediately, my fingers trembling as I pressed his number. His voice was calm but grew tense as I explained. We need to act fast, he said firmly. Meet me at my office. 30 minutes later, we sat in Emmett's cluttered workspace, documents scattered chaotically around us. My heart felt lodged somewhere deep in my throat, every breath strained. They're desperate now, Emmett murmured thoughtfully, rubbing his forehead. Mom's capable of this, but forging signatures takes skill. Who could have done it? A chilling realization surfaced. Evan, I whispered. He knows my handwriting better than anyone. He had access to everything. Emmett's jaw tightened. We need an expert to analyze the signatures immediately. If we can prove forgery, their entire strategy collapses. We rushed to hire a forensic handwriting expert. The waiting hours felt endless. Each passing minute intensified my anxiety. That evening, I paced my small apartment, unable to settle, haunted by possibilities of failure, public humiliation, even professional disgrace. Doubts whispered relentlessly in my mind. Had I missed something obvious? Had trust blinded me again? At midnight, Thomas called again, sounding even graver than before. Charlotte, the initial results are inconclusive. Whoever forged it did a disturbingly good job. Without definitive proof, tomorrow's hearing could go either way. My knees weakened. Sitting heavily on my sofa, I stared blankly at the floor, stunned. My entire future, once certain, was now a fragile thread threatening to snap under pressure. Then came the knock at my door. Sharp, unexpected. Fear tightened my chest. Opening cautiously, I found Evan standing silently, eyes filled with distress and guilt. "What do you want?" My voice trembled despite efforts to appear calm. "Charlotte, please listen. I didn't forge your signature," he whispered, voice desperate. "My mother paid someone, a professional. I swear I didn't know until today." "How am I supposed to trust anything you say?" I retorted sharply, anger and hurt surging. "I don't expect trust," Evan admitted softly. "But I brought proof." He handed me a small flash drive, avoiding my eyes. "Security footage from our home's office. Lorraine meeting the forger, he's visible clearly. It'll exonerate you." I stared at the tiny drive, pulse pounding violently. "Why help me now, Evan?" He hesitated, pain etched deeply into his features. "Because despite everything, you never deserved this. I owe you more than I can ever repay. It's not forgiveness, I just want you free of them." Then he was gone, leaving me standing alone, breathless and shaken. I quickly called Emmett. He arrived minutes later, and together we reviewed the footage. Each frame revealed undeniable truth. Lorraine calmly exchanging envelopes of cash with a shadowy figure who handed over perfectly forged documents. Emmett exhaled sharply, relief clear. This changes everything. Yet even as relief washed over me, sorrow lingered stubbornly. Evan's act confused and humbled me. Trust remained elusive, but his attempt at redemption meant something profound, a reminder that humanity isn't entirely black and white. By morning, Thomas had secured the new evidence. The courtroom session that followed became chaotic, yet exhilarating. Lorraine's confidence shattered as the footage played publicly. Her face drained of color, eyes wide with disbelief as whispers erupted in shock around the room. The judge stared sternly at Lorraine, declaring firmly, "The court finds sufficient grounds to dismiss all allegations of embezzlement against Ms. Bennett. Furthermore, this evidence implicates Lorraine Bennett in criminal forgery and perjury." Lorraine crumpled in her seat, Evan beside her, resigned yet strangely relieved. I closed my eyes briefly, breathing deeply, feeling tension leave my body in waves. As we exited the courthouse, Emmett placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You faced your worst fear, Charlotte. You survived." I smiled faintly, nodding. "Barely." "No," he corrected gently, with dignity. Walking toward the sunlight, I felt unexpectedly stronger. Lighter. The turning point had nearly broken me, but in the end, truth won again. The waters had deepened dangerously, but I'd learned to swim. The courtroom held its breath, a thick silence pressing down like a storm waiting to break. Today was about finality, about justice, not just for me, but for every hidden manipulation, every carefully masked lie I had unknowingly accepted for 15 long years. Lorraine sat rigid, pale and visibly shaken from the revelation of her crime. Walter, once unflappable, slumped heavily in his chair, eyes fixed blankly forward. Evan remained subdued, shoulders tense, looking defeated, but also oddly liberated, as if finally unburdened by complicity. "Your Honor," Thomas began steadily, "the evidence presented clearly demonstrates the defendant's deliberate intent to deceive and exploit my client. But there is one final piece of evidence we'd like to submit." The judge nodded firmly, her expression alert, yet calm. "Proceed, counselor." Thomas glanced briefly at me, confidence shining reassuringly in his eyes. Turning back, he raised his voice clearly. "We submit a recorded conversation, recently uncovered, between Lorraine Bennett and her husband Walter, explicitly detailing their entire scheme from its inception to execution. It decisively proves malicious intent and deliberate financial exploitation. Gasps rippled softly through the spectators. Lorraine's eyes widened in disbelief, turning sharply to Walter. For the first time, Walter's mask cracked openly, fear and confusion flashing plainly across his usually impassive face. Thomas pressed play, and Lorraine's voice echoed through the courtroom, chilling in its cold calculation. Charlotte trusts us implicitly. Evan will keep her busy, grateful, blind while we handle the money. By the time she realizes it, she'll have no choice but to walk away. It's foolproof. Then Walter's deep voice responded, reluctantly complicit. What about Emmett? He suspects something. Lorraine laughed quietly, dismissively. He's a coward. He'll never act. Trust me, we hold all the cards. As the audio ended, silence returned, tense and absolute. Lorraine sank lower in her chair, defeated utterly, the reality of exposure hitting her with brutal force. The judge broke the silence sternly, her voice clear and unwavering. This evidence leaves no room for doubt. I find the defendants guilty of intentional deceit, fraud, and exploitation. All claims against Ms. Charlotte Bennett are dismissed. Additionally, I order immediate restitution. Ownership of the property will revert fully to Ms. Bennett. The defendants will also pay $90,000 in damages. Relief flooded my body, though not in triumph. Rather, a quiet affirmation of justice restored. Beside me, Emmett exhaled audibly, shoulders relaxing visibly for the first time since the trial began. Lorraine, trembling slightly, stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is absurd. The judge raised her hand, cutting her off sharply. You've had ample opportunity to speak. Your actions, clearly documented, leave no doubt as to your culpability. Lorraine's mouth snapped shut. She sank back slowly, the fight finally drained from her. As the courtroom emptied slowly, Evan lingered awkwardly, approaching with cautious steps. Charlotte, he murmured softly, I know apologies are meaningless now, but I genuinely hope you find peace. I looked at him closely, sadness mingling with newfound strength. I already have, Evan. In the truth. He nodded silently, stepping aside as Emmett moved closer, gently placing his hand on my back, guiding me toward the exit. Outside, the afternoon sun felt impossibly bright, fresh, cleansing. Emmett paused, turning to face me. His expression carried both relief and admiration. You did it, Charlotte. Justice prevailed. I smiled faintly, breathing deeply. We did it. Without your help, your strength, I might have faltered. He shook his head gently. It was always your strength. I merely reminded you of it. Returning home alone that evening, I felt an odd stillness, like the air after a fierce storm. The house stood quietly before me, mine, fully mine at last. Yet, oddly enough, I realized I didn't want to live within its walls again. The victory had transformed the meaning of the house entirely. It had become more symbol than sanctuary. That night, I made a decision. The next morning, I contacted a reputable agency, arranging to rent out the house. The income would serve as investment, financing something meaningful. Perhaps a foundation helping other women find their voices against manipulation and injustice. The very thought brought an unexpected warmth, a deeper sense of fulfillment than I'd felt in years. A few days later, Emmett visited again. We sat together on the porch of my small apartment, sipping coffee, watching the gentle rain falling softly around us. What now? He asked quietly, genuinely curious. I thought carefully, then smiled gently. Now, I truly start living. He returned my smile warmly, sincerity filling his eyes. You know, through all of this chaos, something amazing emerged. What? I asked softly, intrigued. You, he replied simply. You became the person you were always meant to be. The words resonated deeply within me. He was right. Pain, betrayal, and injustice had forged strength I never knew existed, clarity I had never experienced before. Later, alone beneath a blanket of quiet stars, I opened my journal again, writing words I'd carry with me forever. Truth is costly, painful, and sometimes unbearable, but in its price lies the purest form of freedom. Closing the journal gently, peace settled softly into my heart, secure and permanent. The storm was over. Justice had triumphed. And now, a new journey awaited, guided only by truth, courage, and freedom. In the days after the courtroom doors finally closed behind me, the world felt different, clearer, lighter, yet somehow strangely unfamiliar. It wasn't just victory or freedom, it was something deeper. The quiet, steady awareness of rediscovering myself. I didn't move back into the house. Its walls held too many echoes, too many memories woven with betrayal. Instead, I had it professionally cleaned and listed for rent. Within days, a lovely young family moved in, their laughter and energy breathing fresh life into a place that had nearly broken me. With each step forward, my past faded further, gently replaced by new purpose. I rented a modest office downtown, painted the walls a soft, tranquil shade of blue, and opened my own law practice. My focus: advocating for those manipulated or wronged clients whose struggles mirrored my own. The very first morning I unlocked that door, breathing in the scent of fresh paint, polished wood, and possibility, I felt genuinely proud. Emmett arrived later that morning carrying a vase of fresh daisies, a soft, supportive smile on his face. They symbolize new beginnings, he explained, placing them carefully on my desk. I smiled warmly, adjusting the flowers gently. Perfect choice. How does it feel? He asked, glancing around at the tidy, sunlit space. It feels right, I said softly, truthfully. Strange, but very right. You've earned it, Emmett said sincerely, eyes gentle. I'm proud of you, Charlotte. You made this happen. I paused thoughtfully. We made this happen. He shook his head, amused. No, I just nudged. You found your own way. His words warmed something deep within me, reinforcing the truth that I'd begun to realize. He'd stood with me, quietly supportive, never overshadowing or diminishing my strength. That evening, after Emmett left, I sat alone, sorting through paperwork, slowly organizing my files. Suddenly, the phone rang softly, interrupting the quiet stillness. Charlotte Bennett Law, I answered confidently. A soft, hesitant voice replied, My name's Maria. I heard your story. I think I might need your help. My heart surged with empathy and purpose. Tell me everything, I encouraged gently. Maria spoke carefully, sharing a story heartbreakingly similar to mine. Listening closely, I guided her calmly, setting up our first meeting, realizing clearly why everything had happened exactly as it had. My pain hadn't been meaningless. It had prepared me for this moment, this role. After hanging up, I breathed deeply, letting gratitude slowly replace the shadows of resentment. I felt capable, determined, and for the first time in years, truly valuable, not because of sacrifice or debt, but simply as myself. Over the following weeks, clients trickled steadily in, drawn by both my experience and sincere compassion. Each new interaction reinforced my certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. Advocating, supporting, uplifting. My story had become a beacon, gently illuminating paths out of manipulation and darkness. One afternoon, Emmett surprised me with a quiet knock at my office door, carrying takeout boxes and a warm smile. We shared lunch, easy conversation flowing comfortably between us. Halfway through, he grew thoughtful, his voice softening slightly. "Charlotte, there's something I've wanted to say for a long time," he started carefully, eyes gentle yet earnest. I paused, heart quickening. "Go on." "You've taught me courage, dignity, and grace under pressure. Watching you fight, then rebuild, it inspired me deeply." He hesitated briefly, then smiled shyly. "Honestly, I've grown attached more than just friendship." My breath caught softly, emotions swirling warmly. I'd long sensed a gentle shift between us, but hadn't dared believe it possible. He continued quietly, respectful of my silence. "I don't expect anything immediately. I just needed you to know. Regardless of your answer, I'm grateful for you." I smiled warmly, reaching out gently to take his hand, squeezing softly. "Emmett, you've been my anchor through the worst storm of my life. I can't imagine moving forward without you." His face brightened, joy softening his usually serious features. "Then let's figure it out together." "Yes," I agreed gently, my voice clear and certain. "Together." From that day forward, my days filled steadily with meaningful work, supportive companionship, and gradually deepening love. The scars from betrayal healed softly, transformed into strength, empathy, and purpose. Life wasn't perfect, but it had become deeply fulfilling. Honest, free, truly mine. Every day reminded me vividly that rebirth wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, steady, beautifully human, a gentle unfolding toward clarity and purpose. One evening, beneath the golden glow of twilight, I wrote carefully in my journal. "I once believed gratitude meant sacrificing everything. Now, I know true gratitude honors your worth. Freedom is earned when we choose ourselves." Closing the journal, a deep sense of peace filled me fully. I'd reclaimed my life completely, not through vengeance or anger, but through integrity, strength, and compassion. My rebirth was complete, yet wonderfully, endlessly ongoing. Months passed gently, my new life growing stronger and richer with each quiet step forward. The pain and shadows of betrayal no longer haunted my nights, replaced instead by purpose and clarity. Each day brought fresh opportunities to advocate, support, and heal, not only others, but also myself. My office became a safe haven, a sanctuary where vulnerability transformed into strength. Clients arrived burdened and fearful, but left with heads held high, armed with newfound confidence. Each case I won reaffirmed my belief that justice wasn't merely a legal concept. It was a deeply human right. One afternoon, Maria, the first client who had reached out after hearing my story, visited again. This time, she stood tall, confidence evident in her gentle smile. "Charlotte," she began warmly, voice steady, "you've changed my life. Not just legally, but personally. You've inspired me." Her gratitude touched something deep within me, affirming that my struggle had meaning far beyond my own story. "Maria, your strength was always there," I reminded gently. "I just helped you recognize it." She nodded softly, holding my gaze sincerely. "I want to help others like you helped me. Can I volunteer here sometimes?" My heart swelled warmly. "Absolutely. I'd love that." As Maria left, Emmett entered quietly, smiling gently at me. "Inspiring the next generation already, huh?" I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Just paying forward what I've learned." "Speaking of that," Emmett said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking, what if we expanded this idea? Formally create a nonprofit dedicated to people affected by emotional and financial manipulation." My heart quickened with excitement. "Do you really think we could?" With your experience, passion, and my business background, I think we could do anything, he replied sincerely. Let's give it a try. Together, Emmett and I spent the following months turning our shared vision into reality. We named the organization Second Chances, a quiet nod to both our pasts and futures. The response from the community was overwhelmingly supportive. Donations flowed in, volunteers multiplied, and stories of transformation echoed daily through our humble office. One quiet evening, after an especially busy day, Emmett and I walked slowly through a nearby park, fingers intertwined gently. The setting sun painted the sky soft shades of pink and gold, casting gentle warmth around us. Did you ever imagine this? Emmett asked softly, gazing thoughtfully ahead. No, I replied honestly, smiling faintly. But now I can't imagine anything else. He paused, turning to face me, eyes filled with quiet sincerity. Charlotte, this journey taught me something important. What's that? I whispered softly, heart beating faster. That love built on mutual respect, honesty, and support can heal even the deepest wounds. He stepped closer, voice gentle yet firm. I want to spend my life sharing that love with you. My breath caught softly, warmth spreading through my chest. I can't imagine a better journey, Emmett. In that quiet moment beneath the fading sunlight, our paths officially united. Not through dramatic promises, but quiet, unwavering devotion. As our nonprofit flourished, my story continued reaching new ears. Requests came for speaking engagements, workshops, even media interviews. Each time, I shared openly, honestly, not to relive pain, but to illuminate a path toward healing, growth, and dignity. Gradually, my journey inspired broader conversations around manipulation, trust, and personal empowerment. Women and men, too, approached me privately, sharing their stories, finding courage in knowing they weren't alone. One evening, a letter arrived from an unexpected sender, Evan. With cautious fingers, I opened it, heart beating uncertainly. His handwriting was careful, sincere. Charlotte, seeing the woman you've become fills me with deep remorse and admiration. My mistakes cost me more than I realized, yet they taught me humility. You've built something extraordinary from ashes. I wish you every happiness you truly deserve. No bitterness stirred within me, just quiet gratitude for closure and sincere hope that Evan would also find peace. That night, sitting quietly with Emmett beneath a canopy of stars, I reflected deeply on my journey. From betrayal's bitter depths to the gentle heights of fulfillment, every experience had forged strength, compassion, and purpose. Emmett squeezed my hand softly, bringing me gently back to the present. What are you thinking about? How grateful I am, I replied quietly, eyes shimmering softly. Even the darkest days led me here. He smiled warmly, understanding deeply. You've transformed more lives than you realize, including mine. We sat together in comfortable silence, secure in the knowledge that our future stretched endlessly forward, bright with shared purpose. A few days later, I stood before a crowded auditorium, preparing to deliver a keynote speech about my story, our nonprofit, and the powerful possibility of rebirth from pain. As I stepped to the podium, confidence and gratitude flowed warmly through me. My voice rang clear, resonant, truthful. Each of us carries stories of hardship. I spoke softly yet strongly. But we also hold the power to rewrite those stories, to transform pain into purpose, betrayal into wisdom, and loss into renewal. My journey wasn't easy, but it brought me clarity, freedom, and true self-respect. Today, I invite each of you to reclaim your own stories, because every ending is also a beginning. The audience stood, applause filling the hall, a wave of sincere appreciation washing over me. In that moment, tears softly filled my eyes, not from sadness, but profound joy. Leaving the stage, Emmett waited, his gaze proudly supportive. "You were amazing." "Thank you," I whispered softly, leaning into him comfortably. Walking away together, I understood deeply that my rebirth wasn't merely personal. It was collective, inspiring countless others toward their own strength, dignity, and freedom. That night, under gentle lamplight, I wrote my final entry into the journal that had accompanied my entire journey. Life broke me once, but it also taught me how to rebuild. Now, I share my story openly, hoping to illuminate the path for others. True rebirth is never solitary. It shines brightest when shared. Closing the journal softly, a gentle peace filled my heart fully. My new path wasn't just a continuation, it was an entirely new beginning, full of purpose, love, and unwavering clarity. I was home again, truly, deeply, finally free.